So with that being said about the technological component, watching cable news shift right now, there's also an issue that a lot of people are getting their news from this
Yes.
show, shows like this, Shapiro, Rogan,
course.
all of these guys. That's kind of worrying too at some level, right? And I say that, I'm talking about guys that I love, but like, just that, you know, the fact checking is different here than say it would be on
Right.
cable news. Not that cable news has done a great job of it all
No,
the
but
time.
you're right. I mean, we're always a point on a continuum, and we're in the middle of a cycle where the media are being reinvented completely. And you're right. I mean, the problem with individual operators, solo guys on YouTube, is they have so much less to lose than a television network does, that the incentives to get the facts right and be responsible are, of course, much lower. The problem, as you well know better than anybody, is that the media have so discredited themselves that it's like, it's so obviously propaganda.
Yeah, but did you ever think it could be that bad?
No,
like,
I never
as bad
did.
as it
I
is
never
now,
did.
where every day I look at a story from CNN or Politico and
Yeah.
forget BuzzFeed and all
Right,
those
yeah,
other, like
whatever.
forget the really bad ones, Vox, and it's like everything you guys are doing, every headline, the way every Republican has a picture that they look awful in the picture, Democrats look great. Like every little thing, it's like they're just smashing us with it.
They've just turned it up to 11. And I grew up in a media family. I mean, my dad was anchor here in LA of ABC. And so I have always lived in this world, and I always thought the media are liberal, but I was totally wrong about that. They're not ideologues, actually. They're party people. That's what I totally missed.
Yeah.
They are loyal to the party. They feel powerless except as part of a group. That is the main distinction between left and right in this country. And so whatever the Democratic Party's imperatives are, they will act on them. If the Democratic Party invaded Canada tomorrow, you would see, I'm serious, they'd be like, you know, these Canadians, they live among us, they're, you know what I mean, they're a fifth column, like they would actually, it doesn't matter what the party does, they will defend it. Once you understand that, then it all makes sense. They feel threatened. That's the truth. And you and people like you are the main threat to them. It's not me, actually. I'm on a competing medium, but in the same medium. They know that their power is ebbing. And when you feel like you're losing control, that's when you try to assert control.
Yeah.
That's when the most ludicrous propaganda comes, when you feel like, you know, oh my gosh, they're not listening to me. I have to yell.
But that's the funny part is and I tweet this all the time. It's like, if these guys had just been like pretty bad,
Yeah.
I think it would have been tolerable. People would have, because it had been happening for so long, people kind of wouldn't have noticed. And maybe they could have got a little worse and we would have been okay with it. But it's like they've just completely bottomed out. And
well, this is one of the criticisms of Trump that has a lot of truth in it. When people are like, well, he's a destroyer. He destroys everything he touches. You know, probably an overstatement, but he does. You know, you get close, you sit and stare at Trump all day, and you're going to burn out your retinas. Okay, you are. And that's one of the things I try not to do. I don't do a show about Trump. I didn't write a book about Trump.
Yeah.
I'm not against Trump. I think Trump is useful and a truth teller in some ways, but the people who obsess about Trump are destroyed. And that would include his opponents, maybe especially his opponents.
so what would you do to get some of those people back? If they're out there now, the ones that really are overboard on Trump that I haven't, you know, I've been able to reach some liberals, some good lefties and liberals.
Yeah.
So that, okay, we can put a hand out for them. But for the people that are really feeling like they're buying all the nonsense that this guy is Hitler and all of this really, do you have any technique that gives them a little bit
I
of
mean,
an out?
I almost never argue about Trump. I really try not to. I mean, the platonic ideal for me of a show is never mentioning Trump, because I try to take the long view. I mean, look, other shows have different roles. You know, everybody sees like, you know, his or her specific task, but I feel like mine is to try to take the long view. Not easy in the middle of this news cycle, of course. I get caught up all the time in the bullshit of the day, but I really try to think about, like, well, how would this look 10 years from now? Like, Trump will be gone. I'll be gone. We'll all be gone because we actually die at the end, it turns out. So, but I want the country
Hopefully
to continue.
not 10 years from now.
Not 10 years. But I'm just saying, like, what kind of country do you want? That's the question. Do you want to live in a place where the individual has the right to dissent? And I think most people would say, yes, I do.
Yeah. Is that why the free speech stuff has become so important to you?
Well,
I think because you hit that more
it's
than
just foundational. I mean, that's just, if they can tell you what to say, they can control what you think. And if they can control what you think, you're not fully human. And so you're not fighting for a political party or an ideology, you're fighting for your humanity. I believe that. That's what I was taught as a child by liberals.
Yeah.
And they were right, and I bought it then, by the way. And so the ACLU stood up for Clarence Brandenburg, who was not only literally a Klansman from Ohio, but a moron. Literally a moron. He was the least appealing person ever, and they staked their entire credibility on defending this guy. Why'd they do that? They did it, of course, to preserve the absolute right of free speech for the rest of us, and they made the country better. When you abandon that,
yeah,
dude, it's over.
And now you see what comes out of the ACLU, and you're like, you're not defending free speech. You're clearly a progressive group.
They're opposing free speech.
Nice
they issued a statement saying, some speech is just too offensive. Really? Because you defended the right of Nazis to march through Skokie, which everyone forgets had the highest percentage of Holocaust survivors of any town outside Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the most offensive thing you could do. And they defended it, and they lost a lot of money doing it. They lost a ton of donations doing it, but they defended the principle. And I noticed you've got Nadine Strausson's book.
Yeah, we talked about this here.
So there are people like her or Dershowitz or these former ACLU board members who are totally bewildered by this. Not because we care about the ACLU as an institution, who cares? It's some dumb nonprofit, but because the principles are literally foundational.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump back for just a second here. So I want to talk about Fox generally.
Yeah.
So first off, you guys are doing something right. And I don't even mean just you here. Clearly, if you look at the ratings, I just looked at this thing and it's the last bottom 20 shows are all CNN.
Yeah.
The top 10 are basically all Fox. Maybe there's one MSNBC show in there. Beyond just you, what do you think that Fox is just doing right?
Being slightly different. I mean, I would argue that I can only speak for my show. I'm only in charge of an hour of 24, but that it's actually worth defending the principles as distinct from the individuals or the political figures. And over time, you're not embarrassed to do that. It's worth doing. But I think as a business matter and just sort of a matter of life, if you're the guy who's not entirely with the herd and you're actually, no, it's a little bit different. You go to the 19 other stores and you can buy this one product and I've got a different product. I mean, why is that bad?
Yeah, so that just seems obvious. That's
well, what's so interesting is how offensive that is.
Yeah.
It's like Fox, and I've worked at CNN, I've worked at MSNBC, I worked at PBS, I worked at Esquire. I mean, I've worked at a million different liberal publications and television channels, and they're all selling exactly the same product. And then there's Fox in the mainstream landscape that's different. Just one channel is different. And the overwhelming feeling is that should not be allowed. I can't believe that they're allowed to say what they're saying. We need to shut them down.
Well, that's the irony. It's you guys are the only ones that will put me on. I will gladly go on CNN or MSNBC.
You can't get on those channels?
I've never been asked. I can't just show up there and bang on the door, but you guys call me. And every time I've done your show, it's live. I never know what you're going to ask me.
Of course.
And same thing with some of the other shows. And it's I will go where I can talk to people.
Exactly.
But I don't want to be edited and misrepresented, so I don't know that I would trust a lot of these other people.
No.
Okay, so that's sort of what...
But it's just so uninteresting. I mean, if everybody's repeating the exact same pieties, diversity is our strength, our children are our future, or whatever the sort of banality is that you think is profound, if everybody is saying the exact same thing, that's just boring. I like to have people on who surprise me, what? Do you know what I mean? That, just because, again, I'm more curious. I mean, I'm a human being. I want to think about things.
Does it ever drive you crazy to just be in the constraints of what television is?
Yeah, of course.
Because we've done segments where it's we've got maybe 6 minutes, and I feel like I just started, and then you're like, Ruben, I'll see you next time,
Yeah, I mean, I was a writer before I went into TV, and one of the reasons that I failed a couple of times pretty spectacularly in TV is because I didn't understand the medium and I didn't respect it. I was I'm a writer, I'm a deep person, here I am in this shallow medium. And what I didn't understand is that TV is it's a completely different thing.
Yeah.
And it's got its own requirements and its own rules. And you need to understand what it's capable of. And it's capable of great things, it's just not capable of everything. You know what I mean? It's not capable of explaining complex concepts. Just that's not what TV's about. It's not what it's for.
Is it odd to you that the interview, the real long form, just sit down with another human being, that, CNN booted Larry King, which I think was the beginning of the end for them.
So smart, I think that too.
I really believe it. I mean,
I've never heard anybody else say that, but I argued that when I worked there.
Yeah? So you were, because they were getting rid of him. I think he told me, he was here a couple weeks ago, he said, I thought it was the #1 rated show still on the network. It was #2 at the time. And they said, no, we're done. 30 years, adios.
Right, and they also ended Crossfire, which had become a kind of perversion of its former self, but I was in both versions of it, and at one point Crossfire was like a public service, to sort of equally match
Did
sides.
something shift with Crossfire? Because I do remember watching you on Crossfire and watching those guys, and it was
It became partisan, which is uninteresting. Nobody wants to hear what your team thinks, we already know. What's interesting is when we throw up an idea or policy, and we deconstruct it, and we have two fairly evenly matched people, kind of competing for you. So anyway, it became something much more, but the idea was always a good idea, and especially the idea of Larry King. I pitched that show to many different channels, black curtain, 2 people, hour-long conversation, and my argument was this will rate. People want this, there's none of it, and everyone's like, yeah, I don't think so. We need interstitials and graphics, and it's like...
They love interstitials.
It's unbelievable. And now, of course, with YouTube, it's like, you look at the numbers that you're getting and others are getting with that exact format, and they're huge. So it turns out, of course there's a market for that. Why wouldn't there be?
How much of all of this, everything we're discussing here, and so much of what you're doing on your show is just that people are just tired of having their intellect insulted?
Totally. Completely. Well, look at television versus movies. If you had told me 30 years ago that the most interesting, visual art being created would be in television, scripted television, like, what? No, I don't think so. That's the province of morons. Like, that's, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like Full House. But it turned out to be true.
Hey,
because
I have to stand up for Bob Saget here.
Right. I actually know Bob Saget. I like Bob Saget, and he's actually very smart.
Yeah.
But the point is that there is, especially when we're all narrowcasting, when you don't need to reach 80 million people, when you can reach 3 million, and that is a more than viable commercial proposition, you can aim at an audience that wants that, and there's a substantial audience that does.
Yeah, okay, so Fox News, we get it. Some things are clearly going right, and by ratings and everything else. Is there anything that Fox is doing that you think is wrong? Is it too close to the president, or anything?
I'm dodging the question. Even if I had a real answer, I would run from that question because I work there.
Well, that's why I have to ask you the question, right?
But if I'm being completely honest, I'm so caught up in our hour, and it's such a hive in my show, and we have I intentionally hired really smarter than I am people, that I don't have a sense sometimes of the larger programming. I would say as a general matter, I've always tried not to be aligned with any politician because in the end, no matter how sympathetic I might be to the message, it's a politician. And I'm not, if I wanted to be a policymaker, I would be one. Because it's a pretty low bar for that, it turns out. I mean, I could probably be. Right, exactly. So,
do you ever think about it?
Not for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
I would never want, I live in that world, so I know what it is. I don't want that. I have a journalist temperament. I like to watch. I like the freedom to say what I really think is true. I don't want, one thing I will say about Fox, which I'm grateful for every single day, and this is Rupert Murdoch, they do not control what you say. I've had this show for 2 years, almost exactly 2 years. Now, a single time if someone called, well, no one calls me at all, but no one calls and is like, I can't believe you said, there's nothing like that.
Yeah.
They've pure editorial freedom. So why is that not a great job?
Yeah, no, and I know it. Again, I just want to illustrate because people don't understand that. Every time I have gone on your show, that they give me some sense of what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
And that's it. We go live.
It's live, and if you want to say something insane, we can't stop you.
Yeah.
And I would say the other thing is the way TV works, at least at our network, but I think this is true. When I worked at the others, it was also true. The shows have enormous autonomy. They really do. There's not a morning call where it's like, here's our line on this or that or the other. It's like, I never talk to I talk to my executive producer, Justin Wells, whom I love, and a lot of my other producers all morning, just in the car parked outside. I was just doing the show, here's what I think we should do. We can do whatever we want.
Yeah. What's your day-to-day like over there? So I know what it's like to do, I do a couple shows a week and I'm doing long form and this way, but we're not doing a zillion segments and all the interstitials and all that stuff. What's your sort of day-to-day? Tucker wakes up, he's got a show that night.
Yeah, I try, and I'm married. I've been married for 27 years. I really like my wife. My kids are all gone, so I really try and stay home. The key in daily TV is not to go insane. That actually is like the whole deal right there. If you can keep from becoming an insecure sort of bag of neuroses,
do you mean that
you
just
win.
because of the media criticism and just the constant worrying about ratings?
The
like
medium,
the whole
yeah,
freaking
all
thing?
of that, but just the medium itself leaves most anchors at some point feeling totally exposed and alone. It's like, I'm out here, I've got a staff of 80 people or whatever, but in the end, I'm out here live, it's just me. I'm taking all the crap, and no one's backing me up. I mean, every person in the business feels that way at a certain point, and then you start to feel like, no one understands me. You know what I mean? And you actually become so self-pitying and self-involved that no matter how much they pay you, you're deeply unhappy, and then you start acting in erratic ways and like look at TV and you know exactly who's going through this. And everybody except me, because I keep my world so small. I mean, I married my high school girlfriend. I live walking distance from my dad and my brother and my college roommate and best friend. And that's who I talk to every day, every day. And the reason I do that is because I love them, but also because I don't want to feel the way that most people on TV do. I want to talk to people I love and trust, and I want my security and happiness to come from those relationships and not from the affirmation I get on television, because you will become a crazy person. Someone once said to me, a head of a TV network once said, "What do you think my job is?" I said, "I don't know, running a TV network?" And he goes, "Nope, it's keeping millionaires from killing themselves." My job, how dark is that? But it's also true. It's like his job was to keep the people from going totally bananas, because the medium itself drives you crazy.
And you're doing this, no booze, no cigarettes anymore, right?
No.
You got any vice?
The booze is easy.
You're drinking coffee.
I drink probably, I drink a lot. Voltaire levels of coffee. Not quite as impressive effects. But yeah, and I quit smoking 4 or 5 years ago. But I'm I wouldn't call it a vice, but I'm a enthusiastic user of nicotine gum and lozenges, because I think they really have improved my life, like a lot. I think, I don't want to, endorse the product, but I'm not sure what the downside is of using nicotine. There's a huge downside from smoking, of course. The tar gives you cancer and emphysema, but I don't think that we've shown that nicotine, for people who don't have blood pressure problems, and I don't, hurts you. And I think there's a lot of evidence that it's great.
Yeah. All right. So I want to spend the remaining time really focusing on the book, because we sort of did.
Yeah.
I think we did everything here, but we did everything else. But let's really focus in on the book. Okay. If we're on the brink of a revolution, what are your prescriptions to save us?
I think the first thing you need to do is cool the temperature a little bit. The president's not good at that. That's not his. Temperamentally, he's incapable of doing that. I don't think he sees it as an important thing to do.
So is that, do you think, the fundamental, like sort of if we're looking at this just at a base level, that Trump's temperament and the way the media is with him, is that sort of the root of everything else?
The volatility is the problem. I think that we needed to awaken the people in charge, not simply of our political system, but also of our economy and our culture, from their stupor. Hey! You're not listening. We're going to elect this orange guy to wake you up. I actually think that was a useful thing, a necessary thing. But repeated cycles of political volatility, like break your country, obviously. There are a million examples of this, and it's obvious. So you need to calm people down, and the main way you calm people down is the way you calm children down, which is you explain to them as simply and clearly as you can why what's happening is happening, why you're making these decisions, and you give them some sense that they have some control, not total control, but some control over the decisions that you're making. You enfranchise them, you bring them in. In a democracy, you need to, the system is predicated on that idea. So you need to say to people, look, you want X, Y, and Z? You elected this guy to build a wall? We think a wall is stupid. We don't think it's going to work. We think it's kind of embarrassing, actually. It doesn't matter, we're going to do it, because you have demanded it. You have to kind of give people a sense that the democracy is real. If they think it's fake, they think it's really an oligarchy posing as a democracy, what are they going to do? You don't even want to think about that. So just practice democracy a little bit would calm things down a lot.
Is anyone doing it better than us? Like, for all the sort of anger at each other right now, and it's funny because, I spend time on Twitter where it seems like the Civil War has begun already.
I know.
And then I get out there in real life and I'm on this tour, and it's like I meet thousands of people all across the middle of the country who are wonderful and open and decent and all of those things. But I lost my question in that. What was the point of that? There was a
So
point there somewhere.
is it actually as bad as it seems? And is any other country more stable and happier than ours?
Oh, that was it, yes.
Right.
Is there an example to look at? Because I see all these people always complaining, and as you said, it's easier to break things and burn them down than it is to build. So all these people are always, oh, look at these countries. They always say, look at the Nordic countries. That seems to be the big one. Look at Sweden, and even though Sweden's got all sorts of problems right now,
it does.
You're one of the only people covering it, actually.
Yeah. I'm one of the only Swedes on television. Maybe that's why.
Are you Swedish?
My name is Carlson.
Oh, all right, there you go. I've got a lot of IKEA in here, by the way.
so
I can maybe put you to work at
No,
the end
I'm
of
not. I'm not in any meaningful sense Swedish. I mean, I guess I am genetically Swedish. Not that I even care about that stuff.
1,025.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I mean, those are not models we can replicate for obvious reasons. It's a country of Sweden's got 8 million people, 10 million, something like that. Anyway, no, who does it? Look, nobody does it better. There's no greater country. I don't have a foreign passport. I'm stuck here. I plan to do everything I can for the country because I have a long-term interest in it, and I don't want to move anywhere else. I can't think of anywhere better. Alpine Switzerland's pretty nice, but there's no humor allowed. So I probably go. Anyway, the point is, no. You can look at countries and see their ruling classes doing things you wish ours did. There's no country I kind of despise more than China. But one thing I do admire about China is that its ruling clique thinks long-term about stability. That's their overriding concern. Now, of course, that's rooted in their desire to hold on to power, which is ignoble. I get it. But they understand how important continuity and stability are to the society. So they think deeply, and they don't make the right decisions all the time, obviously. The one-child policy is a disaster, but that's how they think. And I wish we thought that way. I think we've too internalized libertarian economics as a model for everything. That it's always virtuous to destroy this thing and build something new. And what we don't understand is people are not capable of that at scale. 325 million people can't deal with tearing down and remaking the society every generation. They just can't. They'll go crazy. And so we need to identify the things that we want to preserve and actively work to preserve them. And I would start with the Bill of Rights.
So do you think any of the people right here, these beautiful caricatures of Maxine Waters and Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi, who else do we have on there? I'm upside down. Hillary Clinton.
Bill Kristol, Zuckerberg, Bezos.
Who's this? I'm upside down here.
That's Lindsey Graham.
Oh, and Lindsey Graham. Oh, well, okay, so I actually wanted to sort of get Lindsey into this somehow. He's a little pudgier there than in real life. He's become sort of like a star suddenly. What do you make of sort of
rightly so.
These Republicans that, even Mitch McConnell, they seem like they've got a little juice at the moment.
For sure.
The Kavanaugh thing did something.
Well, they did the right thing. And they're on the cover of my book not because of that or any real political reason. Particularly Lindsey Graham is there, and it's described inside. He's the embodiment, and I like Lindsey Graham, and I think he's smart. But he's the embodiment of a phenomenon that I think is really destructive, which is the refusal of people to learn from the failures that they created. And so, it's okay to have supported the invasion of Iraq. I did. Mm-hmm. What's not okay is to 15 years later, look at it and be like, no, that wasn't a mistake, and no, I refuse to learn from what happened, and yes, I think we should do it again. That's something for which you should be held responsible. That's my only point. It's I catch my kids doing something wrong. I'm not surprised that they did something wrong, but I demand that they concede they did something wrong, and I make them try and learn from it. That's just basic.
Yeah. All right, so let's do, I know there's nothing that people on television like doing more than predictions. we got an election coming
Well, they don't
up.
like accountability is the problem.
All right, so you seem pretty open to this. So, look, I had Glenn Beck on last week.
How was he?
He was great. Look, this is a guy who, if you haven't sat down with him in a while, oh, okay, good. This is a guy who freely admits now that he was part of the problem, that he was one of the people that led to the polarization, and he's trying to fix it.
Yes.
People will say, well, his motives, he just wants money. It's
people's motives are unknowable.
Yeah, and I don't want to attack people. Yes, if you repeatedly show me that your motives are bad, fine. But I see a guy who genuinely is trying to fix some things. So when I discussed this with him about the midterms, we sort of agreed basically that the only option that I see that is remotely possible here for the betterment of the country going forward, the Democrats kind of have to be destroyed so that they can rebuild.
Right.
I don't. Otherwise, if they do well in these midterms, we end up in 2 years of impeachment, and then it's like that revolution thing that you think we're on the brink of.
I agree with that, and the reason is not because Trump is inconvenienced or impeached or whatever. The reason is that the problems that led to Trump's ascent are unaddressed. I mean, that's the dying of the middle class is the core problem, and no one is talking about it. And Trump, I have to say, sometimes makes it easier not to talk about it because he seeks to be the person people talk about. Anyway, you know the problem. Yeah, I mean, I think the ideas need to be repudiated really clearly. Like, you don't win when you say that the guilty have an obligation to prove their innocence. I'm sorry, we're not rewarding that.
Yeah. Was that the ultimate, like, sort of just obvious way this all was going to go? Like, everything with identity politics and everything else, and believe all women, or because when you group everybody, you can't have anybody that
Exactly.
wanders. Like, so the Kavanaugh thing really was kind of the, like, did it seem obvious to you? It seemed obvious to me. That's what it felt like. The way the reactions were.
Totally obvious. And, I mean, I got caught up. I mean, I say it's obvious, but I also got caught up, as I always do, in my sort of literal, like, but wait a second, what about Ted Kennedy or whatever? When I should have been far more sophisticated and just said, yeah, what you just said, which is, of course, they're doing this because they have to do it. And this is kind of the logical apogee of identity politics anyway, that no one is really human. We're all just sort of component parts of a larger whole, of a group, and we have to act as a member of a group. We can never act alone. You know, our unique humanity cannot be acknowledged. I mean, you must deal with this all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like a straight white man, so like, you know, whatever. I guess I'm acting according to type. But if you're not, you know. So anyway, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's yes, and I should have known that, of course. But the point is, I don't think that most people buy that or want to buy. They don't want to live in that country where you're required by your DNA to act a certain way? Like, so what makes you different from a robot at that point?
And these are the exact same people who are now defending Elizabeth Warren, who could not be more fraudulent in what she's saying. Have you had a Native American tribesman or a leader?
Of course. I mean, I have to say, I think that story, for me, has been a happy respite from all this heavy stuff because it's just so hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
How out of it Elizabeth Warren is. But I do think there's a deep question at the bottom of it. Not even at the bottom, at the very top of it, which is, like, should your DNA determine your life? And maybe I'm just too American or too Californian or something, but no, I don't think it should. I don't think you're responsible for what people you never met did. I think you're responsible for the decisions that you make. I don't think we should hurt you because of your eye color or your height or your race. I mean, like, if you start to accept that it's okay to inflict group punishment on groups, then, like, I mean, isn't that the whole lesson of the 20th century, that that's wrong and that's a cul-de-sac that ends in bloodshed? Yes. So why are we accepting this? And every day on TV, one of the main, last thing I'll say, but one of the main problems with our coverage is that it's brought to us by dumb people. And I really think finance, the whole finance world, is partly to blame. 40 years ago, like, Evan Thomas from Newsweek used to live on my street. Evan Thomas is a very smart guy, went to Harvard. You know, he's kind of liberal, whatever, but he's legitimately smart, smarter than I am. He left Harvard and went to work at Newsweek because that was kind of an acceptable path. Now, what percentage of Harvard seniors are going to Newsweek? No, they're going into private equity. So what you're left with, it's almost like medieval England, where, you know, under primogeniture, the first son gets the estate and the second son has to, like, figure it out or become an army officer or a vicar or something. It's like we're getting the dumb people. We're getting the people who can't think for themselves are all of a sudden winding up as cable news anchors. It's like, what? Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
It's sad.
That's why I'm on YouTube with all the smart people of YouTube. Totally, you know what I mean? Listen, man, you know, the first video that I did in 2018 was that I thought this was going to be the year of unusual alliances, and I would say this is right up there because I consider this a great alliance, and I think you're doing great work and all that stuff. Not that you need me to
look, anybody.
Tell you that.
It's really simple. If you feel a moral obligation to scream at people in restaurants if you disagree with their political views, you're not on my side, and if you don't, you are. So it's like, do you know what I mean? Like, this is such an intense moment, it's thrown everything into stark relief. I just care about aligning myself with people who believe in the individual and freedom of expression, period.
I hear you, brother. And for more on Tucker, watch him on Tucker Carlson tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox News.